Hi everybody. What I'm about to share with you is something that I've attempted to share with UFO researchers for over 13 years, starting in 2008. I've tried to contact literally everyone who had a viable email address with the exception of Project Camelot. The only researcher or podcast host that I'd ever heard from in regard to this and my whole entire life story is Rex Bear from the Leak Project. And that, of course, didn't go anywhere, and which is the subject of another video. But this is in regard to a soul transference memory, and it's a memory that I've had since I was a child. And this memory has transitioned a bit over time, which I'll explain in the next few minutes. In the beginning, I thought this memory was a memory of heaven. And the reason I say that is because the memory itself was shrouded in a white haze. And this is what I vaguely remember. And this is the first part of this memory, because this memory has been altered by flashbacks, which I'll get to momentarily. The memory starts with me being in a bright white haze. And in this bright white haze, there's 3 or 4 other people nearby. And one of the reasons that I thought this was a heavenly realm was because I was communicating with these beings telepathically. And of course, when you're raised in the Christian religion, or any religion for that matter, and you watch television, and you go to church, and you hear about near-death experiences, you hear about a bright white haze. Often this is a bright haze that people often experience on the astral plane. Excuse me. So anyway, I'm in this area, and I can't say it's a room. I don't really know. It doesn't really have much of a feel to it at this point. And these beings are talking to me, and they're asking me, well, they asked me one particular interesting question. And that question was, what race do I want to be? And there was a few other questions that were asked of me, and at some point I began to remote view a very close friend of mine who at the time was living on Earth. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about this part of it until we get to the second half, but I'm arguing with these people because it was in regard to having to take a handicapped. And I was afraid that I was going to be made either mentally handicapped or physically handicapped in some way. And the worst fear that I had was to be visually impaired. I didn't want to be blind. And so here I am arguing. Now, the whole time this is going on, the people that I'm interacting with are relatively unresponsive. They're all business. They didn't show much compassion or understanding. They acted as if they had a job to do. And this memory has been with me ever since. I mean, I really can't pinpoint a specific time when it actually came about. It just feels like I've had this memory my entire life. Now, back about 20 years ago, I tried to share this memory in various different forums, for empaths and different forums that were on Yahoo, and I never got a response. So I had no feedback from anyone. But while I was growing up, I got to a point where I started to wonder, maybe this was a dream. Maybe somehow I had a dream and I thought it was real. So anyway, fast forwarding a good bit to my late teens and early 20s, I began having these really intense flashbacks. And the interesting thing about these flashbacks is that the flashbacks were in chronological order. So everything that I had forgotten from the initial memory was in fact restored, but also there was a lot more information that started to come through. And I had these flashbacks over a period of probably a couple of years, and I remember one specific flashback I was in a public park down the street from my house, and I was standing in a big field, and I remember just standing there, and the flashback hit me, and I just remember thinking to myself, oh, that's what happened. So anyway, we're going to get into the actual second half of this memory, so you'll fully understand what this is about. And the reason I'm sharing this information with you is because it has been a foundational type of memory. It's actually been a foundation for my belief system. And whenever I was afraid that I was sick or I was going to die, and which I've had a few brushes like that throughout my life. I've had a few things go wrong with me. Had a lot of health problems, actually. But this one particular memory always kept me grounded. It always reminded me that not only was there something in the afterlife, but there was something that I experienced that really, well, what it was saying to me is that I was alive before this life began. And this lifetime that I had felt quite significant. And this memory also put me on a path of seeking the truth. I wanted to find out who I was, why I'm here, and where I'm going after this, just like all of you. So I hope that you get a lot from this. Now, the reason I think this is important for a lot of you is because the majority of the people who are going to be watching this channel are going to be identifying as starseeds. And what I want you to know is that everything that I'm about to tell you is identical to what you yourself went through the moments before you came here, the moments before your soul was removed from your ET body and implanted into a human body. And before we go on with this, I want to let you know that, and this is from information that I have received over the last 16 years from extraterrestrial contact, and I've had contact going all the way back to about age 6. And it may have gone back further than that, but it was around age 6 that I began to have what I thought were night frights. I had presences coming in the room at night. I had some other paranormal activity take place. And since then, I've learned that a lot of these incidents were in fact abductions. And this is something that I have to pursue in hypnosis in the future as part of this project. My hope is to be able to go under hypnosis live on camera and so that I can uncover this information and share with you. But that remains to be seen. We have to see what happens. Things are kind of up in the air. We have this COVID lockdown. We have a series of lockdowns going on. We're not locked down where I'm at, but it's still, because of COVID and because of a lot of other things, it does put a damper on what you want to get accomplished. For that reason, I haven't done any of this yet. I was going to do it some time ago, but the whole virus pandemic got in the way. So anyway, let's get started on this. The memory begins where I'm standing in a room. It's no longer just a zone of white light. And as these flashbacks took place, the white light almost completely faded. There's a little bit of blurring in the memory itself. I can't clearly make out things, and this memory is quite old. Because I'm 47 now, so I didn't really get the improved version of this memory until sometime in my late teens. I really can't say when. I would say sometime between 16 or 17 and probably 21 years of age. You could ask me a month from now, maybe a year from now, and I might tell you a different number, so I'm not really sure. But I'm standing in this room, and it feels like a rectangular room. And directly in front of me, there's directly in front of me, there is a wall with a computer terminal. And the male that's in the room, the male extraterrestrial, was standing over by this computer terminal. And there's at least 2 or 3 other people in the room. I know there's a female. I sense that there's other people there. And they begin, well, the first thing that I remember is they asked me what color, what race I wanted to be. And the choices that I had were white and black. And what's interesting about this is that the words are not in a different language. I'm remembering this in English, but it's a telepathic communication. And that tells me that there's been some tampering with the memory, that it's been edited. Also, too, what's interesting is that I can't make the faces out of the people in the room. Some of the faces appear to have a complete shading around the facial area, where I can't make out the features. I can make out the outline. Also, too, in one case, I believe it's when the ET woman walks up to me, there's a black box around her face. And literally a complete rectangular black box covering her eyes. And it's interesting because it's as if someone took a computer program, literally, and went into this memory and altered it and then re-implanted it back into me from my original memory that my higher self possesses. And so anyway, I'm in this room, and right next to me on my left-hand side, there's this large white machine. It reminds me of a big MRI machine, but in fact, it's a little bigger, and it's shaped completely different. It's somewhat square or rectangular. It doesn't have sharp corners, sharp edges. It's pretty well-rounded corners and edges. It's a kind of a soft geometry. And protruding out of the front of this machine is a bed and a platform. And there's a type of glass enclosure that comes down. I don't remember if it lowers down like a hinge or if it retracts into the actual machine and then comes out and then shuts down on top of you. So anyway, at this point, the machine is open. There's no glass enclosure down over top of the area where you lay at. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking to myself, as this person does something with this computer terminal. And of course, he asked me the question about, whether I wanted to be white or black. And I remember looking at him. I remember looking directly towards him. He was facing away from me. And I said to him, I said, I'd rather be white. And I said, besides, I like white skin. And I was referring to it in a way that as if my skin color or my race or my container body was just clothing for my soul. And I said it from a context that I'd done this many times before and that I'd been in various types of container bodies. But I also mentioned too, I said, the reason I want to be white is because of the racial tension. Now the racial tension, and this was probably about 1973 when this particular memory took place, because I was born in February 1974. You figure 9 months in the womb, and this is probably a day or two before, actually no, this would be sometime in the middle of 1973. And I'll explain why in a moment, actually when I get to the end of it. And then after we get through that part, I begin wondering about what's going to happen to me. And I felt really nervous at this point, and rightfully so. If you can imagine what would happen if you were in this position. I mean, your whole life has come to a stop. You're literally leaving your body. You're going into a body of another species, another race of people, on a completely different planet that's in a primitive state, and your life and everything that you loved and you appreciated is completely just going to be over with, and abruptly over with. And I couldn't imagine, I mean, I can't describe the way I felt. It was a combination of depression and despair, anxiety and fear, and then just this desire to get it over with. So I'm standing there and I'm pondering what my plight's going to be. And the interesting thing is this is a telepathic society that I'm in. There's absolutely nothing that I can't get information-wise, just using my mind. The problem is that I can't get that information in this memory. So I'm very anxious. I know that they've got something planned for me that I'm not going to like. And it's got me on edge. And I know that they're planning something. I know a little bit about what it is. I'm thinking it could be a mental handicap, a physical handicap, a visual handicap. It could be anything. I could have an auditory handicap. And so I start to think, and I start to remember this person. It was a really close friend of mine. And I've got this sneaking suspicion that this person is in fact one of my guides. He's the one that I haven't met yet. In fact, I've only heard him say one thing to me. He told me my grandmother's soul origin, which was Arcturian, and she passed away just last year, September 27th. And but I haven't had any correspondence with him since. And I think it's him, but I'm not sure. We'll find out soon enough. But I remember this person, and I could see him as he was, and this was the part of the situation where I was remembering who this guy was, and I could see him as he was as a Haujean. And if you notice, my handle here in YouTube is Haujean Contactee. That's because the Haujean race is where I'm from. It's an Orion extraterrestrial race of tall, human-looking ETs. They have vertical slit eyes, 5 fingers, 5 toes, fairly dark features. Look kind of, I can't say Hispanic, but maybe Indian or Polynesian. So we're a combination of that, but all of the features are very refined because this particular race has mastered its full genetic profile, and there are no defects. If you don't like what you look like, you can change it. However you're born, you can change. You can change your gender. You can change your appearance. You can do whatever you want, pretty much. So anyway, I'm thinking of him as he was. I remember seeing him, and he was young looking because we don't age. He looked like, I would say we probably looked like to be maybe in our early 20s. And he was a fairly thin build. Haujean race is 7 foot tall. You have longer legs in comparison to humans, shorter torsos. We look a lot like, or have the same physiology as what the Nordics are described as having. And if you've seen the video where Rex Bear reads my email, I refer to the ETs as tall, dark-skinned Nordics. That's because the Nordic physiology is identical in the Haujean race. The only difference is the skin color, hair color, and stuff like that. We're not Nordic looking. We're kind of the opposite of that. That's because we live on a very hot, dry desert planet, and we need these features. And our solar spectrum is identical to this sun. So if you're curious, brown skin is the perfect skin to have under the spectrum of the sun that we have here, which is why white people like myself are as white as a sheet. We have, like, 95% of the skin cancer rate of all the skin cancers, and the other groups of people have the other 5%. So that should tell you a lot. We're really not supposed to be in this spectrum. There's too much UV. So anyway, I begin to think of this person, and I begin to think of how close I am with him. And it felt like this guy was just, somebody I loved a lot. He was just a really close friend. And I really enjoyed his friendship and companionship, and I missed him. And I was thinking about that. And then I immediately began to remote view him. And I remote viewed him as he was at that very second. And when I remote viewed him, I could see an image form in my it was in my third eye, but it was partially obstructing my field of view. And if you've had any telepathic contact and you get visuals, sometimes it can come in and it'll actually obstruct your view, but you can still see through it. If you want to see through what's behind it, or if you want to see what's behind it, you can see it. But it comes into your mind, and it's almost as if it's in your field of view, but it really isn't. And I saw him, and he was in a wheelchair, and he was badly disabled. I mean, mentally disabled, physically disabled. He looked like Stephen Hawking, basically. I mean, he was in that bad a shape. And he was being pushed, and he was African American. He was being pushed by his mother, and he had a couple brothers and sisters. I don't know how many there were. I used to remember this. This is so long ago, but there was probably maybe 2 or 3 other siblings there walking along with her as she pushed him in a wheelchair. And it was on a sidewalk, and they were surrounded by these big buildings. It looked like it had a feel like Chicago or a big city. I know it was a big American city, but I don't know where it was. I think it's Chicago, but I have no idea. I won't know till I reunite with this person and ask him, or I'm back home and I can access it to the collective consciousness. And I kept thinking about his plight and what he had been through, and I kept saying that I kept protesting them, and I was saying it telepathically. I'm like, this isn't going to work. That's not going to work. And I finally got down to the fear of that I was going to be made blind, and that was my biggest fear, because I didn't know how to handle that. It was far worse than having a short lifetime, being mentally or physically handicapped, but being blind was the absolute worst of it. I mean, that was the thing that I was protesting the most. I was really anxious about that. And I remember just saying, and these are the words that I remember, it's just not going to work. And I kept giving him a hard time about it. Finally, this woman came up to me that was in the room, and I know who she is. Her name is Asib, and she's one of my life engineers. And in case you were wondering what that is, that's a term that you don't hear in the UFO or contact your starseed community. What a life engineer is, and there's generally, you're assigned 3 life engineers. And life engineers basically lay out your entire lifetime, and they're the ones who are above your spirit guides. I've got 2 guides, and there's fill-ins, but I've got 3 life engineers. And the 2 guides that I have, as well as the 3 life engineers, have been appointed to me and have been with me my entire lifetime. And I have this one particular one, her name's Asib, and I don't know what the other names are of the other 2. The reason I know who she is because a while back, last year, I was told that Asib was going to actually be in contact with me and help me with this project. And when I got to thinking about it and all the things that I've been put through that I consider to be terrible, because my lifetime, my engineered experience here has been a lot different from a lot of other people. And it's something that I'll have to explain in the future. But I didn't like that. I was quite upset about it. So I did get her name, but her and I don't have any direct contact anymore. Because of the relationship that we have. It's mostly me being angry and resentful over what they've done to me in the past, which was a conditioning process to get me to this point. And I'm not happy about it. So there's a lot of issues there. So anyway, I'm just going to drink of water here. So she comes up to me and she says, really sternly, and I call her the drill sergeant, and because that's how she acts. She's very stern, she's very abrupt, authoritarian kind of woman. Not the greatest person. I'm sure she's nice in her own way when you're around her in a different capacity, but when it comes to me, it's always been just in your face and very, very stern, like a drill sergeant. And she said to me, she looked right at me, and I couldn't see her eyes. This is the one with the black box. And she says, you have to take a handicap. And just imagine somebody walking up and literally just a foot from you and just looking you right in the eye and saying, you've got to take a handicap. And I just, at that point, everything that I had protested about just got shot down. I realized at that point that nothing that I had said had made a damn bit of difference. And that I was going to be going real soon in a matter of moments, and this was it. So I just looked at the ground when I said that, and I said to myself, because I no longer cared to talk to her at this point, I knew it was just a waste of time, I thought to myself, well, I guess I'll figure it out when I get there. But I also said something interesting to myself. And I said this to myself, but at the time that I said it, she was still standing there, and I was hoping that she'd hear it because it was my last protest. And what I said is that I'm a teacher. How am I going to do this? Actually, I've got that a little bit screwed up. But really, what actually took place is that when she said to me, you've got to take a handicap, she also said that you have to we're going to give you a speech impairment. And that's when I said, I'm a teacher. How am I going to make a living? And I guess I'll figure it out when I get there. And at that point, I was staring at the ground. There was no more eye contact with her. And I was given a speech impairment that has held me back my entire life. And this is one of those things that I've never forgiven her or the others for, because this is something that has definitely messed my life up dramatically. And you may not know it, or you may not hear the speech impairment now, because I would say it's probably 95% corrected. And the reason for that is that generally these things start to clear up. Most people who have these speech impairments where they stutter, usually it clears up during their early part or late part of their childhood. For the most part, it's kind of rare. There are people that carry on with these problems, and they may have problems their entire life. This was intentionally given to me, and what I had to do in order to get by, in order to kind of cope with this and make it better, is I realized that if I read to myself, I generally didn't stutter, but if I spoke out loud and talked to other people, or read out loud, which is even worse, I would stutter pretty bad. And when I learned about it I was probably around 14 or 15, I learned that the neural pathways in people that have this problem, those neural pathways are generally severed. They're shorting out. They're not connected. So in order to correct that, I recognized that what I had to do is I had to practice speech. I had to practice reading out loud. And I did various exercises. So I became my own speech therapist, and I was able to get a grip on it for the most part. But it wasn't until end of 2019 that they told me that I was going to be doing this project, this social media project, at which point my speech wasn't good enough to do this. So what happened is they put me through a long period of time, and this is still ongoing. What they do is they reroute your neural pathways. And what I was going to say before, and I got sidetracked there, I was going to say that when you figure out a way that you can speak fluently, if you have a speech problem and you're able to adapt and do a bit of therapy with yourself, you can actually reroute your neural pathways. So if you have an area or a sector that's severed or shorted out, you can route the neural transmissions around that. So it'll go around it, but it'll still cause facial tics, and you'll still have issues. What it means basically is you'll have to put a lot more effort into speaking. So what they've done with me, starting at the onset of this back in 2019, is they began to put me through a series of artificial dreamscape experiences that would stimulate the brain, at which point they would induce energy, and they would force the connections to reconnect. So those synapses would reconnect together, and that would provide me with improved speech. And this takes a long period of time. It's a very problematic process. I dealt with fatigue, mood swing, not mood swing, but it was fatigue, and I had brain fog. I had memory loss, mostly short-term memory, but some long-term as well, which came back. But it was just, you could tell that somebody was tampering with your brain. And there were days that I woke up and it literally felt like I had been on an intense overdose trip of LSD. I mean, that's how some days were. And at the time I was using CBD for nerve pain, and I had to stop that as well, because cannabis products, CBD, which doesn't have really any psychological or psychoactive effects, were a no-no. So I couldn't do that, and I couldn't use cannabis anymore because they were working on me, and I still can't use it for that reason. Until they finally finish with me, and then maybe I'll get stoned once in a while, but it's not something that really suits me anymore, because I have to do this project. It's the rest of my life, and it's something that's very important. And I can't be stoned. I have to be 100% at all times. So anyway, getting along with this memory, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. After that, they told me to lay in the bed. And this is the bed that's coming out of the front of this big white machine. So if you just imagine this big machine right here, and you have this bed coming out of the front of it. And so I get up on the bed and I lay down, and it's got some padding to it. It wasn't a hard metal bed or anything like that, but it's fairly padded. And as I laid there, the enclosure came down over top of me. And at this point, I was looking to my left, to where the wall was, where I was previously standing, and there was 3 or 4 people standing there at this point. There was the female Sebe, the other person, and there was 3 minimum, and I know this because I was told later in telepathic contact that the three people in the room were my life engineers. And so I was with all three of them prior to to leaving and coming here. And I have two female life engineers and a male. I've heard them talk to me in the past. That's how I know this, and I've asked questions. But for the most part, the only one that I've actually seen is a Sieve, and every time she appears, I can see her body, but I can't see her face. It's always in shade. So anyway, I'm in this chamber, and they start talking to me telepathically through the glass enclosure. And what I remember is, I don't remember what words. I used to remember. I remember when I was a little child, I remembered some of it, but the flashbacks didn't restore that part of the memory. I just have an emotion connected to with whatever they said to me, and I know that it was encouraging words. I don't know what they said, but I know that it was to try to calm me down and to kind of encourage me. I'd really like to know what they say, actually what they said to me. If I could guess, they probably said, don't worry, at some point we're going to make contact with you. And everything's going to be okay. You're going to do well with this. We know you can handle it. Maybe they said something like that. I don't know. But as I'm laying there and they're talking to me, the entire chamber that I'm laying in begins to fill up full of a bright white light. At which point, all of my surroundings became just drowned. It drowned everything out to where I couldn't see anything. I didn't feel any physical sensations with this. I don't have any recollection of that. I may have, but I don't remember anything. What I do remember is as the white light became as bright as it possibly got, it was just encompassing everything. It blocked everything out. I began to see a fetus, and I went into it, and that's where the memory ends. And I remember going back when I started college, and I took anatomy and physiology, and it was in the first time I got the textbook. I flipped through it, and I wanted to see what the stages were of a fetal development. And what I found is that what I remember seeing was a fetus at the end of the first trimester. And during the telepathic contact that I had, and this goes back to 2006, 2007, I asked a lot of questions about this experience because I wanted to validate that the ATs that I was having contact with were in fact the ones from that particular memory. And what they told me is that we have to implant you into a human body container at around the 12th week of conception, because that's when the brain activity generally actually starts. And the reason they have to do that is because if they wait, a soul is born. So if they're recycling a human soul, a person that's native to this planet that has been recycled over and over again in this perpetual reincarnation system that's been placed on this planet, they have to get you in before, right around week 12, before the brain activity starts. Because then if they don't, it becomes it's a new person. And it's the same thing with starseeds. They have to put you in at about week 12. Now this could be different on other planets where they do soul seeding operations. It depends on the particular genetic makeup. So anyway, this is the exact procedure that every single one of you who identify as starseeds have been through. Of course, it's completely different, and for a regular person, a native soul of this planet, I have no idea what that process is like. But this is what we go through. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed telling this story, and I hope I didn't disappoint, and I hope that you got something from it. And for now, I have to say goodbye, but I want to tell you something. This project is going to take off from this point. I'm going to do a lot more videos about this subject. And I'm also going to be doing a lot more videos, or a lot of videos where I take on this New World Order. So stay tuned, and please, if you enjoy this video and you enjoy this content, please go out and share this video and subscribe. The videos that I did in the past, I did a couple of videos before, starting back in January. They weren't that great, and I was under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. There's a lot of other things going on at that point too. But what I was surprised is that I was averaging about 60 views, and then it would just die. There was nothing. So in order for this to grow and actually become something, I need your help, because the plan is in the future, near future, is to create a community forum, a website, and to build this. And I have a project partner coming online next week. We've got a great video plan. We're going to be talking about a lot of different subjects, and you're going to love her, just like I do. She's awesome. So I'll see you later, guys. Have a great day.